It's time to eat.
What are you hungry for?
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and Joe Dolan.
Feed me now. I'm starving.
On the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. It is the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast, presented, of course, as always, by DraftKings. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman. You guys know that. Unless maybe we have some new listeners or viewers, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. We love when that is the case. I am a former offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years. It was an awesome temp job in my 20s. Gave me the opportunity to do all these games on television, radio, and also have all these podcasts. Emery Hunt was fantastic on the College Draft podcast this week, which is why we put it on the Even Money feed as well. Remember, Emery makes all these picks against the spread. He nailed Penn State laying the points with Boise State. I was not expecting him to say that, but he did, and he was right. So he's 1 for 1 so far. There's 3 more games today. So if you didn't yet, check out the College Draft podcast, especially if you want to bet on these games today, or even if you just want to know who, the top prospects are in these games. This is a really, really weird week for fantasy football for a number of reasons. Number one, all the season-long leagues ended last week, and rightfully so. Number two, my guy John Daigle is, I believe, in India at a wedding. So pinch hitting today is the one and only longtime host of the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast, Joe Dolan. He is back, the fantasy gangster who had to say goodbye to us because he's so busy during the season. But for a 1-week engagement now that season long is over, he is back. Joe, thank you so much for pinch hitting this week. I love your stuff. You know that. It's a weird week, though, for fantasy football. Like, what is this week even about?
So, I as you know, most people are in leagues that ended last week. And maybe you're new to fantasy football, and this week is the last week of your fantasy football league, and maybe you and your buddies decided, yeah, we're going to get into this fantasy thing, or I joined a new league that ends in week 18, and I think a lot of folks will say, well, why doesn't fantasy football end on a normal week, just like the NFL season? Well, because this isn't a normal week. There are teams that have no motivation. There are teams that have some motivation to get guys statistical milestones so they can get more money in their contracts. But ultimately, a lot of teams are treating this as a developmental week. Other teams are treating it as a pseudo bye week as they head into the playoffs. And you can see that when you look at the point spreads. And when you look at the point spreads for these games, it'll really tell you which teams are motivated to play and which ones are not motivated to play. If a point spread looks weird, it is because of the motivation factor.
That is a great, great point, Joe. Love it. And it's exactly right. It's funny when you say that some teams are trying to get guys, certain statisticals. Listen, I've been on the other side of it, where certain teams don't want their guys to get it, don't want them to hit the playing time bonus for $1.5 million or whatever it is. That actually can go both ways, believe it or not. Kind of depends on the organization.
Yeah, and look, a lot of teams will maybe compensate a guy for not hitting a statistical threshold if they rest him in week 18. I know the Eagles are famous for doing that. So it's all a matter of which teams have something to play for and which ones don't. And that can dictate who you put in your fantasy lineup. That can dictate who you're putting on prop bets. That can dictate who you're putting in a DFS lineup. This is a very popular DFS week. It is a massive slate. Last week, the main slate on DFS was just 8 games. There was only 8 games in the early and afternoon windows on Sunday. This week, there's 13 games on the main slate. So even though there's going to be a lot of players who are not going to be suiting up, or at least taking their normal set of snaps, there are going to be other options to help you fill out your roster so you can afford all those big name guys who have contract incentives or are playing for playoff seeding.
Love it. Let's dive into it. That makes a lot of sense to me, by the way. You're right about the prop betting, too. It feels like prop betting is getting bigger and bigger every year as well. We'll start with the two Saturday games, which I think are really interesting. There's the Browns at the Ravens and the Bengals at the Steelers. Let's start with the Browns and the Ravens, Joe.
All right, so this is a massive point spread. The Ravens are 17.5-point favorites. So obviously the Ravens and the Steelers are still playing for the divisional title. The Ravens have all the motivation in the world to play their guys. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Cleveland Browns, Ross, Cleveland has basically no motivation to do anything. They came out and said Bailey Zappi, Kevin Stefanski said Bailey Zappi might play a little bit. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to play a little bit. And as you have seen, that has not been good for the Cleveland Browns offense. Dorian Thompson-Robinson has given them all the turnover woes of Jameis Winston without the upside of Jameis Winston. So the Cleveland Browns are not an attractive side here whatsoever. As for the Baltimore Ravens, load them up. In addition to the fact that they have the need to win the division, Lamar Jackson's still playing for the MVP. Derrick Henry can get an additional $500,000 on his contract, I believe, if he scores a touchdown in this game to reach 15 touchdowns. So Derrick Henry with a 3-score point spread is an absolute slam dunk bet to score a touchdown in this game, in my opinion.
Ooh, okay. I like that one. Anybody on the receiving side of things?
Yeah, I mean, look, Mark Andrews has been coming on of late. Zay Flowers had a great season, kind of quieted down a little bit, but I would be loading up on my Baltimore Ravens. They have every incentive to go out and score points this week against a Cleveland Browns team that has nothing to play for, as the point spread bears out.
Okay, let's get to the next game, because I feel like I'm taking crazy pills with people asking Tomlin whether or not he's going to play his starters if the Ravens win earlier in the day. I understand if the Ravens win earlier in the day that the Steelers can't win the division and be the 3 seed. But there's a huge difference for the Steelers between being the 5 seed and the 6 seed. Am I missing something, Joe? I mean, the Steelers should want to win very much so that they can be the 5 seed and play at Houston and have a chance to win a playoff game for Mike Tomlin for the first time in a very, very long time.
The point spread is interesting here. The Steelers are underdogs at home, and Tom Bralla handles that at Fantasy Points. He does the power ratings and all that. I'm not sure if in a normal week the Steelers would be favored at home or not against Cincinnati, but these are two teams going in different directions. The Steelers are on a skid. The Bengals are playing for literally everything. The Bengals still have that outside shot to make the playoffs, so they're going to be full go, and we know that. Jamar Chase has a chance at a historical season. He's on the heels of 1,700 receiving yards, 15 touchdowns. Like, Jamar Chase could have be one of the first receivers ever to put up the kind of numbers he will. So we've got absolutely nothing to worry about with the Cincinnati Bengals. But as you mentioned, Mike Tomlin said, I doubt I'll be in that mentality when it comes to resting starters if the Ravens win. And you're 100% right. I think avoiding the Ravens in Baltimore and instead going to a slumping Houston team, that's essentially a playoff win in and of itself for the Steelers. So I expect the Pittsburgh Steelers will be treating this game like a playoff game.
Yeah, I know. I agree. All right, so what does it mean for these any individuals in particular from a fantasy perspective?
Well, I mean, obviously, Jaylen Warren's been better than Najee Harris of late. I think they've really started to decide that he's been the better option for them out of the backfield. And George Pickens against a Cincinnati secondary that has been eaten alive all year, I think could be in line for a big game.
We'll keep it moving with the Sunday slate. We'll do 8 games in episode 1, 8 games episode 2. So we're 2 games in. We'll go all the way through the Giants and the Eagles here in episode 1 of the show that's so nice we do it twice. Let's talk Carolina Panthers and Atlanta Falcons. You've had a chance now, Joe, to see a couple of Michael Penix games.
I thought Michael Penix played pretty freaking well, quite frankly. I know he had the interception on Sunday night, but I thought he played well, and I don't think he was the reason they lost that game. As a matter of fact, I don't know what Raheem Morris is doing. Well, Ross, what kind of interest rate do you think he's getting on those timeouts that he put in the savings bank? Because I don't know why he didn't call the timeout. You have a 56-yard field goal for a backup kicker. You're putting your kicker in bad spots because they didn't have timeouts to call. Well, they did have timeouts to call, but they didn't call them. There could have been at least 2 more plays to get them 5, even 10, 15 yards closer for that game-winning field goal. That's on the coach. That is not on Michael Penix. And I love what Michael Penix has done as a passer. Far be it from me to sit here and tell you I'm buying in on Kyle Pitts again next year. I'm not going to go that far. But there seems to be something that has been unlocked here. It was a great throw for the touchdown for Michael Penix, and he is getting the ball to their best player. He is getting the ball to Drake London. Even Kyle Pitts has had some moments with Michael Penix as the starter. And I love what they're doing with Bijan Robinson. They've essentially phased out Tyler Algier as a true rotational player. He only comes in for a couple of carries, and I think even Chris Collinsworth was talking about it, how the defenders for the Commanders were chasing Bijan Robinson all over the field because of all the elusiveness that Bijan has, and then Algier just comes in and is like a bulldozer. And it's really hard for defenses to adjust to that. But this is a Bijan Robinson team. This is a Drake London team. You can even talk me into Darnell Mooney against a Carolina team that really showed you last week that anybody who's dinged up, we're going to kind of put those guys on the sidelines.
Got it. Yeah, I like the it's almost like pitchers with 2 different speeds. I like the different speeds of having both of those pitchers. Anything notable about Carolina?
Well, I think you can talk yourself into Bryce Young for DFS. He has played the best football of his career over the last few weeks. He's gone, per our guy Jake Tribby, gone over 23 DraftKings points twice in his last 5 games. The Panthers don't have any incentives beyond trying to play spoiler and figuring out what they have in Bryce Young, but I think Young has done way more than enough to convince them that he deserves a long look as their starter, if not just an outright confirmation that he's their franchise quarterback. Atlanta has struggled defending the pass this year. They are the 5th softest schedule-adjusted defense for opposing passers, so it's a good matchup for Bryce Young, and he is the 13th most expensive quarterback on the main slate on DraftKings. I like Bryce Young in this matchup, though keep in mind, A.J. Terrell had a big hand in shutting down Terry McLaurin on Sunday night.
Joe, let's get to one of 2 Tucker Bowls this weekend. I mean, we are blessed. It's Washington against the Dallas Cowboys in Big D.
Yeah, so Washington is favored here. Now, we know Washington cannot win the division. Philadelphia has already locked up the 2 seed and the division title. But much like you mentioned in avoiding Baltimore for the Steelers, I think you probably want to avoid the Eagles if you're the Commanders here. I think you probably understand that 2 weeks ago, you got the win and Daniels had his moments, but it was a fluke, Ross. We know it was a fluke. Devontae Smith drops a pass. Oh, and by the way, Jalen Hurts plays 1 drive. You probably want to avoid going into that environment in the wild card round for a team seeking revenge. So the Commanders are favored here in Dallas, and they have every incentive to come out and win this football game. I think Terry McLaurin is going to want to bounce back. Dallas could not cover A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith last week with Kenny Pickett at quarterback. I think this is a big bounce back spot for Terry McLaurin.
Ooh, okay. And the Cowboys still don't have CeeDee Lamb, so they're just riding Rico, maybe?
Yeah, Rico Dowdle. The Eagles had some trouble early in that game with Brandon Cooks, but Rico Dowdle is going to be the guy who's going to get the football quite a bit. Washington gave up 2 rushing touchdowns to Bijan Robinson on Sunday night. And look, Dallas is going to want to play spoiler here. They're at home. I just don't know if Dallas has the firepower to do it, but Brandon Cooks is somebody who can be a cheaper DFS lineup filler for you if you need him. The one guy I've been really disappointed in has been Jake Ferguson for the Cowboys. He did not have a very good season. He had some injuries. He lost a fumble against the Eagles last week. It was kind of a disappointing year for Jake Ferguson, and maybe the fact that Dak Prescott got injured has a large part to do with that for the Dallas Cowboys.
That's interesting. Yeah, I thought Ferguson would do more this year as well. Next game up, it's the Bears and the Packers, Joe.
All right, so the Green Bay Packers, their motivation is really to avoid the Philadelphia Eagles in the first round of the playoffs. So the third seed right now in the in the NFC is the LA Rams. The Rams have been weird of late. After Matthew Stafford went toe-to-toe with Josh Allen in that game a couple weeks ago, their offense has completely sputtered out. So they're leaking oil, and the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't think, are leaking oil. They had the fluky loss against Washington and then bounced back. So the motivation for the Green Bay Packers is to avoid the Philadelphia Eagles. And look, they got off to a bizarre start against the Vikings last week and then managed to cobble it together and had a shot to win the football game. That was not to be, but all systems go for the Green Bay Packers, for Josh Jacobs. You do want to check the status, though, of Christian Watson. They've had guys in and out of that lineup at wide receiver. Jaden Reed was a huge disappointment last week from a DFS perspective. Check the status of Christian Watson, because that will dictate what we might do here from a DFS perspective.
Next game up, it's the Jags and the Colts. Man, that was hard to watch the Colts get lit up like that. It does not sound very good right now in Indy. Meanwhile, in Jacksonville, anyone that listens to the Ross Tucker football podcast, you heard Sean King last May say that he thought Brian Thomas would be the best of the rookie receivers, and he might be, Joe.
He's been awesome. You know, he was just kind of that kind of cast off of the rookie dress, because everybody wanted their hands in Dynasty on Harrison and Adunze and Neighbors. And not to say that those guys are going to be terrible, they're not terrible, but I know it's been a disappointing year for Harrison in particular. But here's the deal with Brian Thomas. People are talking about him like he was in his own tier. Like there was the big three, and then there's Brian Thomas, and then there's the guys like Ladd McConkey and Liggett and Pearsall, and those guys were all in the third tier. Well, turns out, Ross, Brian Thomas is in his own tier. It just happened to be above the big three as opposed to behind them. Guy's been awesome. The Indianapolis Colts gave up 45 points to freaking Drew Lock last week. Malik Neighbors going nuts. Brian Thomas is one of my favorite players on the entire board this week in DFS. All the incentive for him to just continually piling up and putting up record-breaking kind of rookie numbers. It's been an awesome year for Brian Thomas, and I love him in DFS against an Indianapolis team that, quite frankly, has quit on Gus Bradley.
What about offensively for the Colts? I thought it was a really bad look, and they're saying back spasms, and so, okay, I believe that. I believe he was having back spasms, but I still feel like it's a bad look for the Indianapolis Colts that Richardson did not play in that game. I mean, he finished the game before. I called that game. Colts-Titans, yeah. Richardson finished the game, made a nice throw to Michael Pittman to win the game, and then the next week he's not able to play, and they list multiple injuries as a result. I think if you're the Colts and you're thinking about moving forward, you can't count on that guy on multiple levels, it seems like.
I mean, they're in a really difficult spot, Ross, because they're not going to have a high draft pick. This is not a good quarterback class as it stands now. I think the only two guys who are getting consensus first-round grades are Shadur Sanders and Cam Ward. Now, obviously, Emory Hunt would know better than I about that, but those are kind of the guys who are getting. So the Indianapolis Colts are in a really difficult spot where, you want to avoid making the same mistake that the Chicago Bears made. Do you fire the coach and then bring in a new coach to coach Anthony Richardson? You probably want a clean break, but this year is probably not the year for that clean break. Either next year Anthony Richardson shows you he can be the guy, or Jim Irsay does, and this is coming, Ross, by the way, or Jim Irsay does everything in his power to get Arch Manning in an Indianapolis Colts uniform. That's coming. He has dreamed about that moment. But I think Anthony Richardson needs to put a good performance on the field this week. I'm just not sure he has the ability to do that. Josh Downs was a massive disappointment last week with Joe Flacco at quarterback. Look, if you told me Joe Flacco was going to go for 320, I would have told you Josh Downs probably has 10, 15 targets. Was not the case last week. The only Indianapolis Colt I have really any interest in right now is probably Jonathan Taylor. Even Alec Pierce, who's Flacco's boy. I just don't know if I can trust him if Richardson plays this week.
Next game up is another Tucker Bowl. It's the Bills and the Patriots, and this Tucker Bowl is presented by Labatt Blue Light. A lot of things go better together, right? Golf, holidays, food, football. If you really want to take things to the next level, drink some Labatt Blue Lights with your friends and live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Let's talk Bills, Patriots. I mean, the Bills aren't going to play their guys, but I don't think the Patriots want to win either, Joe. This is a weird game.
I'm staying away from this game pretty much altogether. If you are betting on this game, you are a nut. You are like a preseason. Now, I know a lot of sharp guys make money playing preseason DFS and preseason betting. I am not one of those people, Ross. This game is the Patriots are 2.5-point underdogs to the Bills. Tells you nobody has any clue what to do with this game. And really, people are sitting here thinking Mitchell Trubisky and the Bills' backups might be better than the Patriots' starters, so the Bills are favored. They say Josh Allen's going to play, but he's not going to play a lot. Gerard Mayo is flapping his gums and talking out of both sides of his mouth. This is from our friends at Coach Speak Index. This is on playing Drake May. I would say right now everything is in consideration, and we'll see how the week goes. My expectation is if the guys are healthy, that they're expected to be ready to go out there and play. But also, it's absolutely a possibility that we bump Joe Milton up to the game day roster this week to see what we have in him in an actual game. But like I said earlier, all things are still under consideration. Talking out of both sides of his mouth, I want nothing to do with this game, Russ, from any perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of value in getting that number 1 overall pick, and I know a lot of Giants fans are not happy that their team gave up the right to the number 1 overall pick with that win over the Colts, especially because the Giants need a quarterback. I think it's almost a little bit different with the Patriots because the Patriots don't need a quarterback, but I think for them, Joe, you can argue it's just as valuable to get the number 1 overall pick so that they can trade down and hopefully get a lot of value out of having the number 1 pick with someone else, Titans or Giants or someone else who wants to trade up, Raiders, that loves one of these guys and wants to trade up for him.
So, Ross, I think one of the things about the New England Patriots that I think is evident watching them, you said this is a Tucker Bowl. You always keep tabs on your old teams. Drake May has performed well behind a sieve of an offensive line. Now, I know that the New England Patriots might have found a little diamond in the rough by moving Cole Strange to center. He might look better there, and that actually gives them maybe a little bit of a building block for the future. But this is a team that needs offensive linemen and needs to protect Drake May. Or could this just be a team that sits there and says, you know what? This isn't the best offensive line class either. You know, maybe there's Will Campbell from LSU. I think the kid from Texas, Banks, is a solid prospect. But do we just take Travis Hunter and just take the best player in the draft? And that's a consideration for the Patriots to have as well. But that number 1 overall pick is going to be valuable for multiple reasons. You know, even if there is no Joe Burrow in this class, well, maybe that's even more incentive for a team like the Giants or a team like the Titans to try to trade up and get that number 1 overall pick, because there is nobody. There is not a multiple level guy. Oh, if Caleb goes 1, we'll just take Daniels. If Daniels goes 2, we'll just take May. This is not that kind of quarterback class. So this could be a very, very important pick for the Patriots if they want to build their future, maybe get a couple of picks to supplement that offensive line for Drake May.
Playoff season is here, and the only thing better than game day predictions are the foods that come with them. Introducing Tums Fantasy Food Ball Pool, brought to you by Tums, America's #1 antacid brand, and DraftKings. Each week leading up to the big game, turn football into food ball by building your best game day plate for a shot at winning a share of $40,000 in cash prizes. Inspired by game day bites and tailgate treats, join the Tums food ball action during this playoff season's most heartburn-inducing time. Visit DraftKings.com/Tums foodball between January 6th and February 9th to enter for free and select your game day plate before the start of each playoff round. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See terms at DraftKings.com/Tums foodball. When you feel the heat of the game, Don't let heartburn keep you on the sidelines. Try Tums Chewy Bites with a tasty outer shell and soft center for fast relief of heartburn, acid indigestion, and upset stomach. Check out Tums Gummy Bites featuring a soft and easy-to-chew format for fast relief of occasional heartburn, acid indigestion, sour stomach, and upset stomach. Both available at Amazon, Target, and other major retailers nationwide. And for more heartburn relief fun, be sure to follow Tums at Tums Official on Instagram and TikTok. Smirnoff knows there's no I in football. Football's a we thing, an experience best enjoyed together with good drinks and good folks. Smirnoff's the world's #1 vodka and an official vodka partner of the NFL. And this is a great week to enjoy some Smirnoff cocktails. It's New Year's Eve. It's New Year's Day. It's college football playoff. It's NFL Week 18. This holiday, when you're enjoying the game and your cocktails, please make sure to drink responsibly. Smirnoff, we do game days. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please do not share with anyone under legal drinking age. Last game, Joe, here in episode 1. It's the Giants and the Eagles.
Okay. Here's the point spread. The Eagles are 3-point favorites at home. The Eagles would be 2 touchdown favorites if we thought they were going to play everybody. So we know about the Saquon Barkley ordeal. I don't think he's going to play. Maybe they give Jalen Hurts a couple of reps just because he's missed most of the last 2 games with a concussion. But I don't think he's going to play either. Saquon's got 2,000 yards. I think the Eagles are going to play it smart. Get Kenny Gainwell. Get Kenny Gainwell in your lineups. Tyrion Davis-Price, because Will Shipley's dealing with a concussion as well. And from the Giants' perspective, if the Eagles rest their guys, could be a really good spot for Malik Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy.
Ooh, yeah. That's actually one real positive I would say from this season for the Giants is they do have some young skill guys that they can feel good about moving forward. Check him out on social media at FG_Dolan. He's the fantasy gangster. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. I'm full, but plenty of room for dessert on episode 2.
Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Feast. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.